We are super lucky to be joined by Allison Borgalt, who's a senior product manager here at Bonterra. Allison has been here since 2022. Prior to Bonterra, she spent nearly 15 years working in nonprofits focused on art, education, and the environment. So it's been a super helpful asset for us here. She currently lives in Rhode Island with her husband, daughters, dog, and cat. And we're also joined by Tess Otts, who's our senior product manager of data and analytics at Bonterra. She's been here since 2021. And she helps manage Insights, which is our embedded data visualization tool. And Tess has over 7 years of experience building products for CSR professionals and has a passion for helping others to tell impactful stories with their data, and is currently living in Fort Worth, Texas with her husband and two children. You're super lucky to have Tess and Allison with you here today. They truly are experts in this space and in this field, and we're lucky to have them at Bonterra. And I'm super excited for them to share with you also. Tess and Allison, thank you so much for spending your hour with us. We really appreciate it. And I will stop talking, catch my breath, and let y'all take over.
Thanks, Amanda. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Really excited to be chatting with you all on this lovely Tuesday. So today, Tess is going to begin by setting the stage a bit, just to understand the current state of corporate philanthropy and to better understand some of the factors that can affect employee engagement and why participation is declining. Then Tess and I will talk through 4 tips that we at Bonterra have seen boost engagement, increase retention, and maximize giving impact, and how to leverage data in those tips. So I'm just going to hand it over to Tess to just start talking about the state of employee engagement.
Finding the mute button. Sorry, everybody. All right. So before I dive in, I just want to take a quick moment to actually mention another webinar that we hosted a couple of weeks ago by our VP of Product, Lauren McCarthy. And it was titled Unlocking Strategic Philanthropy. This comprehensive webinar covered the state of the social good ecosystem, the role that we believe that trust has played into the current ecosystem dynamics, and how Bonterra's overall vision and roadmap plans to build trust and provide a more connected experience for every participant involved. So if you weren't able to tune in 2 weeks ago, it's a fantastic overview and a worthy listen. And I believe Amanda's already shared the link, but don't go yet. We were very excited to have you here with us today. All right, so as we dive into some of the shifts that we've seen, we'll be uncovering the tremendous shifts that have taken place over the last 10 years within the corporate social responsibility space. There's been shifting expectations across employees, across corporations, across social good organizations, all of which are ultimately placing greater demands on workplace giving, volunteering, and grant-making programs. So even more specifically within the last 4 years since the COVID pandemic and the resulting dynamics we've all experienced from that. So as a result of this greater demand, we'd expect to see engagement in corporate philanthropy increasing. However, we're actually seeing the opposite. So I'll mention some of the specific shifts that we've seen, which are likely to be pretty familiar to all of you. All right, so the first shift is that employees expect their workplaces to provide giving opportunities and demonstrate aligned values more than ever before. So there's no shortage, literally none, of data analysis reports, studies that exist out there in the world that relates to employer and employee relationships. But we'll cover just a few that we've highlighted, that we've uncovered today. The first is, according to America's Charities, more than 70% of employees say they want to work somewhere that supports giving and volunteerism, somewhere that has a demonstrated social impact. This is especially true for Gen Z and millennials, which several studies have shown that these generations are actually more likely to intentionally seek out employers with corporate giving and volunteering programs. A Deloitte study also showed that more than 1/3 of these younger generations have even turned down job offers for employers who don't align with their values. And that's a lot. And in today's competition for talent, these types of programs are now seen as a table stakes benefit to attract and retain those younger employees. For companies, engaging employees with strong and demonstrated corporate giving and volunteerism programs has never been more important. As a result, there's an increasing pressure on corporations to drive that social impact. According to the Edelman Trust Barometer, corporations are actually viewed as the only trustworthy institution in the world. So you've got corporations who are trusted to get things done, and employees who are expecting and demanding philanthropic programs from their employers, which has actually led to a dramatic increase in the number of large corporations who publish CSR reports. In fact, nearly all of the S&P 500 publishes CSR reports today, which is up from only less than 20% a decade ago. All right. So as Lauren discusses in much more detail in our recent webinar, which I believe you all should have the link to bookmark for future use, the individual giving rate has been declining at an alarming rate, despite that greater demand over the last 2 decades. For example, 20 years ago, about 2/3 of Americans gave. However, that number has actually now declined to less than 1/2. So similar trends are also being seen in volunteerism as well. But what these declines have caused is an even greater expectation placed on large corporate funders to fill the giving gap on behalf of social good organizations. According to America's Charities, $5 billion is raised annually through workplace giving programs. Nearly half of the nonprofits surveyed indicated that workplace giving is a key growth driver for them because it is seen as an efficient method of fundraising with low administrative costs. So given all of these shifts around employee expectations for employers, increasing emphasis on corporate philanthropy, and greater demand for funding from social good organizations, one would expect to see an overall increase in corporate philanthropy. However, as the need for corporate giving has increased, both engagement in corporate giving and actual corporate funding volume have declined. As CSR evolved, somehow both employees and social good organizations were left behind. As a percentage of profits, corporate giving rates have been declining over the past 40 years, once inflation has been factored in. And this is despite the massive increase in the number of registered charitable organizations in that same time period. So over time, this has led to even more social good organizations being forced to compete for a stagnating pool of grant and workplace giving opportunities. For employees, despite expecting and demanding more access to giving and volunteering programs, they're actually disconnecting from corporate programs at an alarming rate. Participation in workplace giving and volunteerism has dropped by 1/3 over the last 3 years alone. So addressing these problems and delivering on the increasing expectations of employees and customers is a critical imperative for corporations to attract and retain talent. So now that we've shared more context about the what and the why of the giving declines seen in recent years, we're actually going to talk through some tips that we've compiled that we can help you see success in corporate giving and volunteerism programs that you are offering today or maybe offering in the future. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Allison to kick us off with our first tip.
Thanks, Tess. So our first tip is to understand your employees. While this tip might seem very straightforward, it can really address some of the root causes of low or poor engagement and participation numbers. As we just discussed, as Tess just went through, employees are more interested than ever before in giving and volunteering programs. However, if the program doesn't align with the causes that they care about or where and how they want or are able to participate, then the program likely won't see the same kind of results that it might have in the past as employees bring their own passions and interests. I know we've all also heard the phrase, if you build it, they will come. And I don't know about you all, but I find that to rarely be true. So the sheer existence of philanthropic programming is no longer the bar. Ideally, you'll want to listen and learn from your employees and adapt your offered programming to fit what they will be most likely to participate in. You can gather this data through data visualization or analytics tools, and Tess will talk about that in greater detail in just a minute. But connecting with employees themselves is another great way to get some of that feedback and insight. So for example, simple surveys, polls, or focus groups can provide you with valuable information about what causes employees care about. You can also take advantage of regional or local champions. Those champions can form relationships and make direct connections on the ground to collect feedback from your employees on what is or is not working for them. We have on the slide here a few questions that you might want to consider when gathering feedback from your employees, like what kind of programming do they want, or can they even participate in? For some, they may prefer volunteering time over monetary donations, or they might have specific causes or times of the year that spark more interest for them. And importantly, do they feel supported in their philanthropic activities? If they want to volunteer, do they have the time available to take off from work in order to do so? Is there flexibility there? So what you might actually find is that by streamlining programming and configuring it to just meet the needs and interests of your current active employee base, which might take adjusting over time, those programs themselves can end up having a greater effect. So I'm now going to hand it back over to Tess, who can talk a little bit more about data and data analysis to become more knowledgeable about your employee base and to inform your approach. But before I move on, just one more thing on this. I think it's really important to understand that this tip really lays the foundation for many of our other tips that we're going to talk about today. So I think this one is really important concept to sort of keep in mind throughout the presentation, even as we talk about other tips. So now over to Tess.
Thank you. All right, so before I dive into some examples around data storytelling, I just wanted to take a moment to explain the benefits that leveraging a data visualization tool can provide. To take what used to require you hours of time to discover totals, averages, trends through countless Excel reports, calculations, pivot tables, can now take just seconds. Data visualization tools such as CyberGrants' Insights allow CSR admins to quickly visualize aggregations, averages, counts, so many more things, while also being able to drill into the specific records or details that make up a given aggregation if needed. So leveraging data to tell your story of impact can not only ground your understanding and how your programs are performing today, but they can actually provide predictions into what to expect in the future. Now, I personally am incredibly passionate about telling stories with data. This is why it's my job. So this is a topic I could honestly talk about for hours on end, but I'm going to refrain and stick to some very basic ways that you can begin to paint a picture of engagement with your data. Again, before I jump into the next slide, some best practice tips that I always like to share when it comes to working with data visualization tools that you'll see me try to demonstrate in some of the examples is one is to have a really good idea of the types of questions that you're looking to answer or the stories you're trying to tell with your data. So which month of the year do we see the most engagement? Which employee types are more or less engaged in our programs? Or even what is the average gift amount or average hours volunteered? This is just the start of really endless questions that you can ask with your data, but having a good idea of what you're going into it trying to answer will really help you. Next is always start your analysis with a baseline understanding of the total potential audience. Then filter, refine, and drill in on your data elements for a more granular analysis. Always start simple. Last is when building dashboards for other users, keep the visualization style simple. It should take no longer than just a few seconds for a consumer of a dashboard to be able to answer questions from a visualization. So if it's taking them minutes on end to get an answer, it's too complex. All right, so with that, I'm going to jump ahead. And so our first example, and as we're talking again about our first tip, understanding your employees, I thought a good example to start here with is a simple chart that shows the total number of active employees, not necessarily those employees who have or have not participated, but just your total active employee population, and then how that ranks across your age generations. We've talked a lot about millennials and Gen Z and their expectations. So it's really important to really understand where your existing employee base sits, or at least what percentage of these generations make up your existing employee base today. Again, that baseline understanding. So from this baseline example of employees by generation, you can then begin to dive deeper into the data to learn how each generation is or is not engaging with your existing CSR programs. So how much are they engaging? How often? How recent? What types of engagement? And you can imagine this can be sliced in many ways by donation type, which I'll show here in the next example, by program, by organization cause. And then you can go even further and say, how have these trends changed over time? So you can see here in this example, I started with just the basic percentage of total of the generations as they exist across your employee base. But then you can start to see how each particular generation is engaging with your programs? What percentage of them are engaging in both your giving and your volunteering programs? What percentage aren't engaging at all? These are all indicators of how you can drive change in the programs that you're offering today by knowing what you do need to know about your existing employee base and how they're participating. And so age generation is really just one example of employee metadata that can be analyzed, but as I'm sure you know, engagement can be measured in numerous ways. We also often see CSR admins analyzing engagement by employee type, department, hierarchy level, employee location. And this last example here I have is employee tenure. So how long has someone been with the company, and how does that indicate how more or less engaged they are in our programs? So just some examples here. I'm going to pass it back to Allison now for our second tip.
Thanks. And so our second tip is connecting employees directly to nonprofits. Oftentimes, your employees will already have causes or specific organizations that they're interested in or engage with outside of work. So if we build off the previous tip that I mentioned was rather foundational, it's important that their philanthropic interests and connections that they already have are reflected and eligible in their corporate philanthropy programs as well. So as stated here on the slide, 30% of employees don't give through their workplace giving programs because the causes that they care about aren't available. So the best way to solve for this is to encourage these relationships and facilitate connections between employees and nonprofits to make sure that employees have access to the organizations that they care about. And then to tailor your programming to allow for flexibility for an employee or a donor to see and make decisions for themselves in the programming that's offered. So a couple examples here. So we have a client that had offered a 2-to-1 match for any organization that supported one of their key objectives, advancing education. But they also offered a 1-to-1 match for any other organization to help amplify giving. So both of these programs ultimately advanced our client's programming, and their mission to support education was able to be pursued, but it also didn't exclude anyone who either didn't resonate with that same mission or just had different causes that were important to them at that moment in time. And then also on our volunteerism side, oftentimes we see volunteerism grants set up where an employee must use a volunteerism grant toward the organization that they volunteered with. But offering flexibility here as well is another way that we can support employees in how they might want to give as well. So offering some flexibility to say you volunteered with one organization, but now you can give that volunteer grant to another organization. It doesn't have to go to the same place. That can provide some of that flexibility that we talked about that really gives employees some more options and can open the door for more participation and more engagement with more nonprofit organizations. Conversely, even if a donor does not have a specific organization in mind, they'll still need trustworthy and accurate information about nonprofit organizations. And they will want to be perhaps even more confident that when they're giving through the corporate program, that their information and their gift is secure. So what's exciting about this piece in particular is that if you start to unlock this ability for your employees to use your CSR tool to self-serve with nonprofits in an easy and secure way, it really removes the need for a middleman for all philanthropic activity to take place and to be accounted for, which is a huge time saver for CSR employees. But it's also a really exciting way for employees to sort of take charge of their own experience, to take charge of their giving and volunteering, to use the tool themselves. This also goes both ways. Nonprofit organizations rely on corporate giving and volunteerism more than they ever have before. 49% of nonprofit organizations say workplace giving is a key growth strategy for their organization and an opportunity to promote their mission. So for Bonterra, strategic philanthropy, this is reflected in Front Door. And this is a rapidly growing network of over 170,000 pre-vetted nonprofits that can be made available to employees and leave CSR professionals confident in those connections. Nonprofit organizations will also have one unified location to review and confirm gifts, which creates efficiency, security, and confidence. These are all the elements of a great giving cycle that we sort of talked about before and important to donors as well. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Tess to talk a little bit about causes and ensuring the causes that your employees are interested in can help really form and secure these connections.
Yep. All right, so diving back into the data, what you see here is a pie chart that shows the percentage of employees that have participated in each of the 26 cause categories. Again, we're going to start with a simple baseline. However, maybe you want to dive deeper into the other ways that cause participation can be measured and evaluated. This could be by employee count, which is what this example is showing here. By engagement count, how many times is someone engaging with a certain cause over another? By donation amount or even average donation amount. Again, total hours or average hours. By programs such as credit card, payroll, volunteering, and then additional employee metadata like employee type, department, team, age, generation. So literally there are endless ways to slice this data to understand just how your employees are or are not engaging across all cause categories. But from here, you might want to see how cause engagement has changed over time. So possibly in response to the constant changes and events happening in the world around us. Maybe you want to see this change by year, by quarter, by month, by week. Really, it's whatever timeline makes the most sense for you to tell your story of impact over time. So in this specific example, we can see that Food, Agriculture, and Nutrition Organization cause has increased from 4% in 2022 to now 12% in 2023, which has tripled the number of participating donors in that cause category within a single year's time. So these the popularity of causes can absolutely change year over year, even month over month. And it's important that you stay involved and informed of those changes. Now, from here, I of course want to, and certainly could, dive deeper and deeper into the why behind this change occurring. But the point is that by leveraging the data and tracking year over year trends, you can make those informed and even predictive decisions of how best to adjust and tailor your programs in a way that will resonate with a larger percentage of your employee base and ultimately increase the impact of employee engagement that's already occurring. So thinking back to that example that Allison gave around the 2-to-1 match earlier, this is a great example of how to switch your programs up to account for that. All right, so I'm going to pass it back to Allison to tee up our third tip.
Yes. Tip 3, make matching programs simple and easy. Now, I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with the benefits of a matching gift program. However, there are still $4 to $7 billion in matching funds that go unclaimed every year. So with this tip, we're again going to find that it's crucial to understand your employees and what might be getting in the way of these funds being used. So again, some of these questions we have on the slide here are important because we've seen them have significant change on matching gift program success. So some things to consider. Are your employees aware of what they're eligible to participate in and how to participate? If they aren't aware of the program or are unsure if they're eligible to participate, they won't even ever bother starting the process, figuring out how to get going. That onboarding time period, or a time when an employee is onboarding, is a really great time to make sure that all employees know what's available to them and how to participate. You might even incentivize or create special opportunities during this onboarding time period, like incentivizing giving a gift in the first 6 months of employment. That's just one example. And then also making sure that there's a consistent drumbeat of communications afterwards as well to make sure that that employee stays engaged. The regional or local champions that I mentioned earlier are a great way to keep this communication active. We know that we send emails endlessly and they don't always get read, but to the extent that they can form a relationship with somebody that can help remind and keep this conversation going in their mind, that's always a great tool. We've also seen that adjusting some of the match criteria, like a minimum gift limit, can create better access because it removes a barrier to entry. That's something that you might learn about when you get the feedback from your employees from tip number 1 on how to boost participation. Similarly, removing the need for an employee to submit a receipt as proof of that donation, which is converting to a little bit more of a trust-based model, if it's possible for you. This can remove a barrier to submission in that workflow. So adjustments and tweaks like these to match criteria can make the program more approachable and make the user experience easier. And they can also make the eligibility rules clear. And that can all make a huge difference in putting more funding in the hands of nonprofits, which in the end results in greater impact. So overall, make sure that it's easy for employees to know when their donation is eligible for a match and where and how to submit a request, and remind them to do so. So over to Tess for a little bit more data.
More data. Okay, so in this example, we're starting with, again, a simple gauge visualization to indicate the dollar amount of matches that have occurred last year compared to our annual match goal, or this could be a budget of some kind. So really just trying to gauge the progress of how far you reached to your goal. From here, you can begin to dive into the why behind why the match goal was not met. You might wonder, well, how much existing participation is being recorded without any company incentive to do so? Or put another way, how much more engagement might we see if employees knew their efforts could be matched? Now, this example can quickly show us, this example can quickly show us the number of employees that have donated or volunteered, but did not receive any kind of match for their efforts. So in this example, that's over $2 million in unmatched gifts and 67,000 unmatched hours that could have resulted in that much more potential impact if a company match had been offered, understood, or utilized. From here, you can even go one step further to look at this by program, to see the types of engagement already occurring that did or did not have company matches involved. In this example, we start to get more clarity into the $2 million of unmatched gifts and unmatched hours that we see above. Because as you can see here, these certain programs have no matches because there's a good chance we don't offer a matching program for that type of giving. So again, this can lead to several additional questions you can choose to dive deeper into. Do we offer a matching program for this type of giving or volunteering engagement? If so, what is the match criteria? How are we communicating that incentive to employees? Are these employees located somewhere that is not eligible for your matching programs? Which organizations are being engaged with that are not currently eligible for a match? And what about that organization makes them ineligible? So really knowing these foundational answers will provide you with the data that you need to propose and implement your programmatic changes within your organization. Back to Allison for tip 4.
Tip 4, our final tip. So our final tip is about building a giving-centric culture. And I know I talked about tip 1 being foundational. This tip, I think, is really where it really starts to get transformative. So the first aspect of this really comes from leadership and management. Philanthropic activities can sometimes be seen as really a grassroots sort of effort, or not something that leadership is truly invested in. Unfortunately, that mindset can really stifle the success of any program. When giving and volunteering is deeply integrated into the fabric of a culture or company, and there is investment, support, communication, and excitement about these programs communicated from the top down, we've seen these programs really take off in an exciting way. And employees, as a result, feel excited and empowered to get involved. Paid time off for volunteer hours is a great way to encourage this. But if we were to go a step further, above and beyond, one way to do that is to have managers bring this up as a talking point in regular check-ins. Have you volunteered recently? Same thing for team meetings, or even all staff or all hands meetings at the company. Things like this really encourage participation in these programs, and really drive that point home that it's important to the company. Managers could even spend time to create goals and action plans for achieving these philanthropic goals. This often happens generally in the form of volunteering. This all really cements this as a part of the fabric of the culture of the company. And as we've talked about before, at the initial sort of intro to all of these slides and tips, these kinds of actions and cultural shifts can play a huge role in employee satisfaction and retention. So it's about almost much more than even just the participation in those specific programs, but happiness in the company as well. And so bringing employees together and using a CSR tool also really gives them a home base for centralizing activities, which becomes even more important as more employees hopefully become engaged and they have one reliable place to go for this information and these activities. When this is the case, employees often become empowered, and this sort of starts to democratize the activity, empowering employees to create their own volunteerism events within the system, either for themselves to get their coworkers excited and raise awareness about the causes that they care about, or to create team volunteering events, for example. We've talked about this again a little bit before, but it can really break down the wall if more employees are invested in taking ownership over this activity. And finally, a little healthy competition and gamification really goes a long way. So this is especially successful where leadership is also engaged and using the tool themselves, participating in the competition. This is even better when it goes above and beyond surface level gamification. If there's anything else that can be done to really show a company's commitment here, it should be considered. We've seen awards given to employees or teams with the most volunteer hours, and we've seen this amp up activity in a huge way, or even rewards as well when possible. So I'm going to hand it back over to Tess again for data on our final tip.
All right. So from the aspect of data analysis for this tip, this example just shows you a basic list of your top teams by total impact. And the way that we calculate total impact here at Bonterra is the employee gift amount plus the company match amount plus the projected pledges that have yet to be converted into gifts, as well as the value of any volunteer hours that have occurred. So that is an individual's total impact. So this can lead to certain questions as which teams have the highest number of employees who have both given and volunteered, making the most of your available programs as they exist today. So in this example, we started with our basic list of teams and how much total impact they've accrued. This kind of shows you how they're engaging. So this percentage is really incorporating both our giving and volunteering programs versus these teams are mostly volunteering. And really, these can all be indicators of where you need to encourage, celebrate, promote what your existing teams are already doing. And again, what are we doing to incentivize, elevate, and celebrate these top supporting teams? How can we turn these top supporting teams into ambassadors to further promote our CSR programs and encourage their peers from other teams to participate? This can, of course, be drilled down further by the individual employee to identify something like your top 20 donors or top 20 volunteers, where you can learn more about the types of organizations they are engaging with and how much of that engagement was or was not matched. And if not 100% of their gift amount or hours volunteered have been matched, which organizations or transactions were not matched and why. We do also have tools within our software that basically identifies and alerts that employee when they are eligible and if they have not yet redeemed a match. So there are already tools that exist to help with that reminder, but this at least kind of gives you an idea. So all of the data storytelling examples that I've shown today are really just meant to showcase how leveraging data can really be your greatest asset in not only answering endless questions about the current state and future potential of engagement within your existing CSR programs, but for making data-driven decisions to implement programmatic changes to continue to move the needle on your corporate giving and volunteering programs. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Allison to wrap us up and summarize what we've covered.
Yeah, so in summary, you've heard us discuss how important it is to understand your employees and the way in which data, both qualitative and quantitative, can help you create intuitive and user-friendly programming that meets the needs of your employees. We also discussed the importance of direct connections to nonprofits so that an employee's participation can really resonate with them and their interests in a safe and secure way. We talked about making the most of your matching gift program and adjusting configurations to ensure there aren't any barriers to entry or success in matching gift programs, and making sure that money isn't left on the table. And finally, building a giving-centric culture and creating a community that invests and encourages giving and volunteering as a part of that company culture. So with that, we have a quick poll. We really just wanted to gauge everyone's feelings on all of these tips as we close out. So we'd love your feedback if you don't mind letting us know which tip really resonated with you.
Awesome. I'll give folks a couple of moments to finish answering. Interesting. I'm seeing pretty even across the board, but the majority so far falling within building a giving centric culture. And I think that makes sense as it kind of encapsulates, right, like all of these in one in some degree. But a close follow being connecting employees directly to the nonprofits that they care about. So leave that up just for another quick second. But thanks for letting us know. It's always good to get that feedback and understand kind of where folks' heads are at and what they're really focused on. All right. Thanks, everybody. Now, I believe we have some time for questions. So I wanted to jump in. I want to give folks a couple of moments to put your questions in the Q&A. While we do that and while we wait for that, I also have one more poll just for some folks. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about how some of our tools at Bounterra might help build that giving centric culture, if that is a focus of yours, that's our focus as well, right? And so if you want to learn a little bit more about kind of what we're doing within strategic philanthropy, let us know. I'll leave that one up as well. We'd love to chat with you, kind of do a deeper dive into some of Bonterra's tools as a whole. And then we'll also be doing further webinars on this topic. So keep an eye on your email as well for some of those invites that are going to come your way. So I'll leave that up while we go ahead and answer some of our questions. I saw one come through about nonprofits confirming gifts. And someone was saying that they currently require gifts to be confirmed by the nonprofit and are curious if any others here see that as a necessary step, or if Allison and Tess, you might have advice on kind of help overcome maybe that challenge that they might be facing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we have actually seen an increase in participation and gifts being matched when the nonprofit gift confirmation step is removed. I realize that's not always possible for everybody, but you can also think about it maybe from the perspective of a certain threshold. So perhaps that's something that could be possible for some of the smaller gifts or gifts under $100, for example. That's something that we've seen some of our clients do, which again talks back to that sort of a little bit of that barrier to success potentially, if it's possible to skip that when possible.
Awesome. Thank you. Tess, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. If not, it looks like we've got about one more question that I can jump into.
Nope, you're good to move forward.
Awesome. So this one came in asking for some more examples, and I know Tess, you did a great job providing some of those data visualization examples, but we have some folks wondering if you could provide more examples on how to increase awareness of programs, saying we have a lot of programs that should be meeting our employees' needs based on what we know about them, but we're still seeing a lack of engagement. So do you have any additional recommendations or examples?
Yeah, I can speak to this a little bit. I do think one thing that is really important to remember is that no program or tool is going to have success on its own without the proper communication built around it. And so that might be your intranet or emails. I know we all get a lot of email, but you can also start to integrate it, like I mentioned, in training or onboarding communications as well. So it's sort of a built-in part of that onboarding, and leading by example when possible. And again, encouraging in other great ways. I also mentioned those local and regional champions to help provide that feedback loop and the reminder that these programs exist. So I think even with the best data and the most rock solid programming, we're still going to see that people are human beings and they require reminders. They require relationships to keep everything moving and to keep them coming back to the tools that are available to them. So I think that's just something to remember is that there are definitely a lot of different factors, and communication is and reminders and building those connections with the employees that are using the tool is something that can't be overlooked.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. I feel like this is kind of asking the same question, but I don't know if Tess, if you wanted to add any more insight. But this one just came in about how you would recommend creating more of a want towards giving as a community and excitement towards annual giving campaigns, kind of creating that engagement within the community.
Yeah, and I think it does echo a little bit of what Allison just covered, and it's really that promotion, that constant excitement. Even within Bonterra, Giving Tuesday is like a Super Bowl here. It's a holiday, and we have hourly updates that we give to the company, and it just creates that excitement that we're all kind of part of the same thing, the same vision, the same impact. So really trying to engage your employees along the way, not just in like an annual report, kind of letting them come along the journey with you so that they can see that incremental impact that they're having throughout the year is huge.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tess. That consistency is key for sure. I'll give folks maybe just another minute to funnel any last second questions in. But if we don't get any, I did want to just give a big thank you to everyone for being here today, for spending your hour with us. I know you're all doing really important, incredible work, and we hope these tips were super helpful for you. Hope you're ready to start kind of continuing on that journey of creating more employee engagement, of adapting to the needs of CSR and what we're calling strategic philanthropy. Really glad to have you here. Hope to see you at our next sessions. And I did want to pass a really big thank you to Tess and Allison for your presentation, for being here. Really appreciate all that you had to offer to this session. If there's anything that we missed, any questions that we missed, or you feel along the way, we'll follow up with you offline, and we'll chat with you in further detail. But Allison and Tess, thank you so much for your expertise and for sharing with us today.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming.
All right, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we hope to see you soon. Take care.